This piece that we're working on, really beautiful piece, beautiful hardware, dovetail drawers. It's a very early piece, but there was some damage to it, and my husband was able to repair that by using, he actually used really strong glue and epoxy, some very thin plywood to the holes in a couple of the drawers, and then sanded it down really flat so that you wouldn't really even know it was there before, but it looked a lot better. And I know I'll end up having to line the drawers, but that's okay because a lot of times I do that anyway if there's a stain or discoloration on a drawer. But this looks as good a repair as you could possibly get without replacing all of the wood in the bottom, which is just cost prohibitive nowadays to do that with the cost of wood. And I think nobody's gonna really ever even know it was there. So when I line that drawer, you won't even know that was there. And it's a really good permanent fix too. It should last forever. Okay, and I have sealed this piece with a, I've done 2 coats of clear shellac because I normally would use white shellac knowing that I'm painting this white, but I only had clear at the time, so I'm using it up. And sometimes I like to use the clear though, so I like to usually have both on hand. But I just thought, well, I'll use up the clear because I don't use the clear near as much as I do the white. And then once that was dry, I let the shellac dry really good because one issue that you can have is if you want something to get that crackle look, all you really have to do is coat it with a layer of shellac and only let it dry maybe 10 minutes and then paint it, and it will definitely crackle. So I usually, if I don't want something to crackle, I usually will wait overnight for the shellac to dry before I paint it, because as the chalk paint especially dries on it, I think it changes somehow and gets tight on top of the shellac, and it causes the cracking and stuff, which sometimes I've actually done that intentional if I wanted it to have cracks, but not for this piece I didn't. So I'm just painting it with the white chalk paint. This is my homemade chalk paint that I use, Bear brand of white paint, and in the flat finish or matte. And what I do is I add 4 tablespoons of calcium carbonate, which is a powder, in about a tablespoon of real warm water, and then you add more water, like a little bit at a time, to make it like a thick paste, and then add it to your paint, stir it into your paint, and it lasts really good. And I paint a lot of things white, so on that one I usually make my own, but if I'm using a color on a piece, I usually just use a store-bought brand of a color, just because I have a lot of different brands of paint that I try. And I like all of them, really. They all have their own little different good points and bad points, and but I like all of them. But they all work nicely together. Sometimes I use different brands of paint on one piece, and I've never had any issues with it yet. Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is when I said that I use 4 tablespoons of calcium carbonate, that is actually for 1 quart of paint. I forgot to say that. So if you're using a gallon of paint, you'd adjust that, of course, or accordingly. And on the repair that we did on the drawers, there was actually thin plywood glued on one side, and there was epoxy used to fill in on the other side. And then they were both sanded down really good. So I just wanted to clarify that. The lighting on this clip is dark, but I didn't want to not use it or have something to show you with the molds. I'm using one of my Iron Orchid molds and the Sculpey clay, and I'm using cornstarch to dust the mold first so the clay comes out really easy. And I'm just going to be adding some keyholes to the fronts of the drawers, and I've pre-marked in the middle with a pencil, and I'm using my finger as a judge for how far to put it down on the drawer. Sometimes I will use my fingers or hands as markers for things, for spacing between them, but you could always measure with a ruler to get it really exact also if you want. And of course I use the Elmer's glue to glue them down on the drawer with, and you just want to be gentle but press down on them. And I'm also making a little piece, some pieces to go on the sides to dress it up too. This is a Prima mold that is real pretty, and I'm going to put 2 on each side. And again, I have marked the sides of the drawer first so that I'm all ready to put them in place. But these will just dress it up a little bit more. And you just, I'm using the Sculpey clay, which you can find at different stores. You can find it at Joann's, Michael's, Walmart has it. You can also, I've used Iron Orchid's brand, and it works really good too. I started using the Sculpey though when I discovered it, when it was hard to get the Iron Orchid clay. And sometimes I use the Iron Orchid brand also. They're all really work good. Once I place these molds on a piece, I do let them completely dry, even though I know some people don't. I like to let them dry completely first. And also I do a coat of paint on them also too. And I use 2 coats of sealer on them, and this is the before and after on the hardware. We use Barkeeper's Friend to polish it. And then one of the last things I do before I wax it is I distress it with 180 sandpaper, and I do it just lightly. I don't distress really heavily. Normally I just do a light distress, which is just on the edges where you would get normal wear and tear. And it just, I think, makes the piece look really nice, and especially with it being white, I think the distressing really shows it off. After using the 180 grit, I usually will use a Scotch-Brite pad, which is a really soft pad, and I just go over the whole piece. This just knocks down any little hairs or little nits that stick out from doing the sealing of the clear coat. And it just makes it feel nicer when you go to wax it too. And when I get done with this, I usually will wipe it all down, and then I go over it with a clear wax, or I'm using Min wax. It's called natural, but it's clear. And I wax the whole piece with clear wax, because anytime you distress it and have the raw edges, you really need to seal it with a sealer or wax. So I'm doing that all over, and I'm also planning on putting some of the Country Chic gray wax on the details. And by using the clear wax first, it allows me to wipe off the excess gray wax a lot easier. Although clear wax you can use to remove dark wax, it's just easier if you do the clear wax first. And then I wipe down the excess with a soft cloth. And here I'm using the gray wax to accent the designs I put on it, which I think really add to it. And once I get this all covered really good, all I have to do is take my soft cloth and just wipe the excess off. Here are the products that I used, and here's a picture of the completed section of the dresser, which I think turned out really nice with what we added and polishing the hardware. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe or click on like and share the video, and maybe try watching some of my others. Thanks.